Have you ever thought about becoming a runner? Maybe you see people posting about their 5Ks, 10Ks, or half marathons on your social media feeds, and you think, ooh, that'd be really exciting to do. Or maybe you're a former athlete, someone who knows what it's like to be active and be outside and be engaged with your body and the environment, but you're not sure how to get active again. You're not sure how to go about becoming fit or being able to start that process of becoming a runner in this season of life. If that's where you're at, we're going to show you in this episode how to become a runner, how to get moving again, and how to also do it in a way that's safe and effective for your body in this season of life.
And if you have never met us, I'm Lindsey Pickowitz.
And I am Brian Pickowitz.
And we're the head coaches and the co-founders of the Fitness Project, where we build fit and healthy leaders. A lot of our clients are in the season, because we are going into summer, where they really just want to be outside. People from all over the map are looking to do a 5K for the first time, or to maybe get out and work on running again when they did it decades in the past. If that's where you're at, again, we're going to set you up for success. And we're also going to speak not just as coaches, but from experience with running. We were two people who were athletes as kids who kind of fell out of it as we got into high school and college. And then really we ended up going on this massive fitness journey where we ended up bodybuilding. Bodybuilding includes absolutely no running. If you're unfamiliar, people who are bodybuilders tend to make fun of people who run. Not that we did that, but it's very much a part of the culture that, like, hey, we don't run here, like we don't do cardio. So Brian and I didn't really consider ourselves runners at all. We didn't do any running unless it was cardio for the sake of a show or something like that. But at this stage of our journey, we've both completed multiple half marathons, marathons, and even ultra marathons. So that's a big leap. And we say that only to share that you can be someone who starts at zero and take it as far as you want, as long as you have the right approach. And of course, it's part of your goals. So what we're going to share with you is not just our story and a little anecdote, but we want to specifically talk to you about how to prepare your body or prepare yourself to start, quote unquote, running, how to prioritize and really start the process of making progress with your training so that you do make progress, but also you stay healthy and injury-free. And then, of course, we have to talk about the running mindset. A lot of running, once you get past the strategy stuff, is really how do you hack your mind? How do you control your thoughts? How do you keep yourself going when you either don't want to run or when it's really hard and you tell yourself, man, I have to walk. I can't do this. How do you get through and handle that self-talk that goes on in your head? We're going to cover all of that so that, again, you can either get back into running or you can become a runner for the first time. Mm-hmm. That's been a question we got a lot too, is I'm 40 and I want to start, but what do I do? So we're going to answer all those questions today.
Yeah, and begin this process and begin this conversation, one of the things I want to start by kind of addressing is the idea of becoming a runner. What does it mean to become a runner? Becoming a runner means that you are someone who runs. And I preface that because there's a lot of comparison that comes with running. It's like lifting. It's like going to the gym. Yeah. You see someone run a marathon, you're like, oh my gosh, I could never do that. So you don't even go out and hit the road. It's really important to understand that becoming a runner is really about your relationship with running. If you start hitting the road, and as we'll talk about, you start progressing and you start pushing yourself, you're going to discover more about yourself through this process than probably anything else. Because when you're running, you're literally out there by yourself for the duration of the time. You're going to realize when you quit, when you want to quit, you're going to start to become more aware of your internal dialogue. You're going to start becoming aware of some of the things that are innate distractions for you, right? You're going to start to see yourself in a different way, which we'll talk about in a little moment and how that relates to our journey. But you're going to gain so much by stepping forward and being consistent. So again, becoming a runner is really your relationship with running. Mm-hmm. You don't have to compare yourself. You don't have to try to judge your abilities based off what other people can do. It's really important that you start from where you're at. And I share that because for me, I kind of led our running journey. For me, Lindsay and I, we got out of bodybuilding, and Lindsay was kind of going through this health journey, restoring her health, restoring her hormones. And I remember we were living in Los Angeles at the time. I had gone through an upper body injury, and I was struggling to find that next thing. I was struggling to find that thing that really pushed me. And I remember I was coaching a few clients, and they said, "Oh, I think I want to go and start running." So I remember one day I was getting ready to go to the gym in Los Angeles, and I thought, well, maybe instead of going to the gym, well, the beach is right here. Why don't I just go for like a 1 mile run and see if I can run for a mile on the beach? I'd never gone. I'd never run a mile. And I remember doing it. I think it took me like 10 and a half or 11 minutes. And I was like, oh my gosh, I just ran a mile. It was the most empowering feeling because it was so hard. It was so difficult. And then from there, I started to wonder, like, oh, could I do 2 miles? Could I do 3 miles? I remember the first time I ran 50 minutes, right? I remember running all the way out on the Santa Monica Boulevard and then coming back and being like, wow, like, I am Superman. Because I wasn't comparing myself to anyone but myself. So it's understanding that the wonderful thing about running is you start to see yourself progress because it's so linear. If you can run 1 mile, well, then next week maybe you run a mile and a quarter. You run a mile, mile and a half. It's really easy to start compounding wins so long as you do it the right way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't even remember that, so that's funny that you say that. I had dabbled with running here and there. And like I said, during bodybuilding preps, like I had sprints programmed at one point in time where it was like a minute of running and a minute of walking and things like that. But I never thought of that as like, oh, I'm going for a run. I just never put 2 and 2 together that I was running. And I remember the conscious choice that I'm going to start running actually came for me when COVID hit.
Mm-hmm.
And because before that, I had gone for runs. Like I remember the first time I went for a mile run in college, and it was the hardest thing I'd ever done in my freaking life. I died. So I just didn't ever think about running again. But once COVID hit, we no longer had access to a gym. We had just moved across at least half the country, went from California to Dallas, and a business had just been started that then had to completely pivot. So there was so much going on, and I didn't have access to my outlet of going to the gym that I was like, I think I'm just going to start running. And we had also just moved to a lake, which was great because we had a little running path. So the circumstances were right. And my mental state said, you still need to move. Yeah. So it became, I'll say, the obvious next choice to run. But I definitely did not expect to fall in love with it.
You did not. Lindsay skipped a part, which I'm completely fine with. I had run a half marathon before that.
No.
Yes, I did. I ran a half marathon in 2019. And so to kind of compound off this, I had found a lot of passion for running because I was in a business that failed. And I hit this wall of depression. And I remember I started running around that lake 2019 before COVID hit. And there was this sign that said half marathon, half marathon, half marathon. And I remember thinking like, oh, maybe I can run a half marathon. The lake was 10 miles, so I ran. Let's just see if I can run the whole lake. I just gave myself a mental challenge. Let's see if I could run the whole lake. I'd been running like maybe 5 miles or 6 miles, so I was like, let's see if I could run the whole lake. I ran the whole lake, and then I was still kind of going through this mild depressive episode, and then the business completely failed, and then it was massive depressive. And I remember thinking like, oh, well, if I can turn, I think it was, if I make this one sale, then I'll do the half marathon because we didn't have any money. So I was like, oh, I can't pay for it if I don't have any money. So I can make this one sale, I'll go and do the half marathon. And I had this one sale that went through. So I signed up for the half marathon. And during that half marathon, I remember running it. And this is the whole point of like, you'll learn things about yourself. I remember running it and like, I started this, the first race I ever run. I was going really fast. And then I remember thinking to myself like, oh, it's just getting really hard. And I started to hear myself say like, oh, well, it's all right. It's your first race. You can kind of take it easy. And I was like, oh my gosh, like if I'm thinking that in this race, then how else am I thinking that? Like where else is that showing up in my life? And then another example was everyone else was getting ready to, what seemed like this curve, like they had to turn back. And I was like, okay, I'm going to slow down because it looks like I'm taking this turn. And what it turns out is that those people are running a totally different race. I was like, so I'm using someone else as a judge for myself to show how hard I can work. And so there was all these little insights I was having during this run. And I remember just something coming over me for the last 6 miles. I was like, I'm going to push myself incredibly hard. I'm going to push myself harder than I can ever imagine pushing myself. And I ran about a 7-minute pace for 6 miles. And I just had this energy, this intensity, this aggression that just flowed out of me. And I remember getting done that race. It was one of my favorite moments of my life, because what happened was I got done the race. I'll share this here. One of the things I remember learning is that Navy SEALs will call out the opposite of what they're feeling in order to change their state. The last mile, I'm running the 7-minute pace, and I start telling myself and feeling like, oh my God, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. Like, it felt like death. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, obviously it feels like death. I'm telling myself this. Changed what I was focusing, ended up finishing the race. But the best part of the race was you were running down the hill. I remember Lindsey running down the hill, and
I was not running the race. I was wearing a dress.
No, she was there supporting me. So it's kind of like, I share that because this was like the real point where I fell in love with running, because it gave me this massive win. It gave me this massive dopamine hit. It was something that I felt like brought us together, and it was just such a positive experience. So on the other side of all the pain, on the other side of all the challenges of running, are these beautiful experiences. I think that's what a lot of people do want to have.
Yeah. It's a good point. I completely glazed over this memory in my mind, but yeah, you're right. And I would agree. I think that once you go through it and you start doing small races or you start hitting milestones, I think that a lot of the initial pain is overridden. It almost sounds like childbirth, what I hear. I haven't done it yet. But after you have your first child and you go through the immense pain of birthing that child, recovering, not sleeping, I'm told that there's a point where you're like, oh, let's do it again. And you're all excited as if you've completely forgotten the pain you went through. So it's like the benefits outweigh the challenges. And one of the things that came up as we were kind of preparing for this podcast was thinking back to not just why we started, but what were some of the initial challenges. And I remember running in Texas, and it was so hot. I had no concept of like, oh, I should run in the morning because Texas only gets hotter as the day goes on. So it was so hot. It felt so hard. It felt like my feet were moving through molasses, especially up until the point where I learned proper running form, which is something we're going to teach you later. But there were so many challenges at first. Like, it felt so hard. So it's easy to look at it now and go, yeah, we have a good base level of fitness. It's not that hard. It's pretty fun. But at first, there are a lot of challenges that you hit. Running isn't fun at first. It's really difficult.
You really are going to develop a growth mindset through the whole process.
That's good. Yes. 100%.
So whatever you face in the first run, you have to look at it as a lesson.
Yep.
Did I run too fast? Did I not warm up properly? Have I hydrated? Did I pick the wrong time of day? You have to have a little bit of flexibility until you really figure out what your body's going to do. And I think that's a really great place to start.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a good segue to actually digging into the strategy here.
If you're looking to start running, let's start talking gear first, because it's one of the first questions. Like, oh, what do I need?
Yeah, what shoes should I wear?
Get a good pair of shoes that feel really good on your feet, that feel comfortable. But it's really not that important. You're going to use them probably less than you expect, especially at first.
Yeah.
So get something that's affordable, get something you enjoy, get a pair of shorts, get a little water bottle, but you don't have to break the bank. The gear is not that important.
Yeah, truly. Gear comes later.
It's procrastination.
It's procrastination for sure. And if you're a woman and you need to and you want to start running and you need to get some gear, have a good sports bra. Wear pants, like, especially if you have thick legs like I do, get a good pair of leggings that don't fall down for sure, because you got to think about it too. If you're going to start running, this is going to be something that's already challenging. So if you have a terrible sports bra and you have shorts that rub your legs and shoes that are too small, like, you're going to think running's this horrible thing when in reality you you just didn't set yourself up for success. So there's balance there,
Yeah,
but
and I'm a
that's
fan.
pretty much it.
Personally, I'm a fan of wearing some kind of inner leggings for my shorts. So switching from I'm just being
Yeah.
they have runners underwear, runners shorts, like the linings that come with runner shorts. Those are ideal. So guys, if you're thinking like, oh, what do I actually wear? Get a pair of, let's say, like Under Armour has like their
Leggings?
not their leggings. What's the actual? I used to work on Under Armour. This is embarrassing. I should be able to be a spokesman for Under Armour.
That's okay.
They have like flexible underwear, which is just that as an example. That it's more like leggings that you can wear. That compression shorts. Yes, compression shorts. I'm sorry for the Under Armour spokespeople who are going to hear this. I let you down. Yeah, get some compression shorts. I find that those are much more ideal for running, and then wearing those underneath your regular shorts. But good pair of shoes. Water bottle if it's hot out. Quite frankly, I don't think that you need a water bottle for
I didn't
anything.
use water until I started running over 45 minutes.
Yeah,
for
so
contest.
as long as you've drank enough water beforehand, you'll be good.
Yeah,
but
you're not gonna.
the key is just
over.
making sure that you have the right shorts, have the right underwear, and I would also say sunblock if you're gonna be running out in the sun. It's
Basics.
ideal to make sure that your skin is protected.
Yep, and that's pretty much it. So don't delay. Get your feet to the pavement. Now, what should your routine look like? How can you, quote, start running? Again, that was one of the questions that came up this last week as we've been preparing. Well, you haven't, but I've been preparing for a half marathon. So I've been posting about it. People have been asking me a lot of questions.
I had no idea.
Yeah, Brian didn't know until
She's
like a
just
week
running.
ago.
I'm like, oh, yeah, that's cool. She's like, oh, I'm running a half marathon. It's like, I just thought you were a badass.
So I'm running a half marathon in 2 weeks with my brother. But nonetheless, I've been posting about it and people have been asking questions. So one of those big questions is, how do I start?
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to explain kind of how long to run, how to approach your like weekly run basis and kind of how to build a base, because a lot of people don't really know. So then they just send it, which is fine, right? You go send it. If you're going to go out and run a mile, 2 miles, most of the time you're not going to know how to regulate your pace. You're not really going to know the right running form. And so it's not that you're going to hurt yourself by any means, but it's going to be 20 times harder than it should be to start.
You don't have a goal, right? So
it's discouraging.
The first thing you have to do is you have to set a goal, right? Set some kind of goal. Even if that's a small goal, like, hey, this week I want to try to go for 1 run.
Right.
All right, that's a goal. But
a goal.
Ideally, I think a 5K is a good goal to start with.
Yeah. Or I want to run a full mile without stopping, depending on your fitness level.
But the key here is understanding, think about maybe a long-term goal that you can accomplish in 3 months, and then you're going to break that down to something you can attempt today. Yeah. Right? Something you can attempt today. And the reason why I say start with a little bit of a longer-term goal, if you want to start running, it's going to give you a target, a purpose, and then you can work towards, and you can program that out. Mm-hmm. But when you think of your first run, the real key is, first, you have to take it slower than you think.
Yeah.
A lot of people, they push way too hard. And they're like, oh, my God, this is so hard. And it's like, yes, because you don't have the ability to really, your body doesn't have the ability to handle that much lactic acid. So the intensity of the burn is going to be so much greater than someone who is used to pushing through those lactic thresholds. So again, start slower. Let your body build up to it. If you feel like you have to take a break, push for 5 seconds and then take a break. But don't feel like you have to push the whole time. Don't feel like you have to run yourself into the ground. Start a little bit slower than you think you need to.
Yeah, and I would say if we're going to take big principles and then we're going to break it down more specifically for those of you in the room who are analytics and like to know exactly what you're looking for. Yes, start with running like 1 to 2 times a week. If you're just like, oh, I just want to start running. Don't start running every day. Your body's going to burn out. Start running maybe like 1 to 2 times a week, maybe like 15 to 20 minutes, right? We're going to start with that. Again, breaking it down. If you have never run ever in your life, and this is the first time you're going to be starting, completely expect that you're going to need to kind of like power walk with like little bits of like 30-second jogs just to test. Okay, so just reasonable expectations. And then if you've run in the past and you kind of know what running feels like, you're going to be able to do intervals which maybe is going to look like, we'll give some examples, but maybe it's you're walking, you're doing 5-minute little blocks, and maybe you walk for 4 minutes and you run for 1 minute, right? Or maybe you jog for 1 minute, walk for 1 minute. There's a lot of different ways you can put it together, but expect to do a walk jog if you're getting back into it. Mm-hmm. And if you're somebody who's like pretty in shape already, like you already work out a few times a week, you go for walks, you've done some cardio, then you're going to expect to do, like Brian was saying, like a really slow, easy pace that doesn't send your heart rate through the roof. You're not going to go sprint a full mile right off the bat.
And so again, start slower than you think you need to. Work through intervals. I am personally a fan of 90 seconds, 30 seconds. Push for 90 seconds, take 30 seconds off, but 1 minute on, 1 minute off. Perfectly fine. But go into it with a goal in mind. That might be, hey, I'm going to do 20 minutes today. That's a perfectly fine goal. Or I'm going to run a mile. Perfectly fine goal. Give yourself a little goal, and you'll see yourself working towards it.
Yeah, and there's one thing I'll say on that. When I first went for a run outside, specifically because I remember it very well, we were in a nice neighborhood in Texas, and I was like, oh, I'm going to go for a run because this neighborhood's beautiful and I want to see it. Nonetheless, all I did was I set my timer for 6 minutes, and I said, I'm going to try to run for 6 minutes, and then I'm going to turn around and come back. Start with something as small as that. Mm-hmm. If you want to. I would suggest if you can't run a full mile right now, which a lot of people can't right off the bat, then set yourself up for how far out you want to go and set a timer for that, and then play with your walk jog and then come back. Mm-hmm. Just start small, 5-10 minutes, 15 minutes, something like that, until a mile's comfortable.
And then when you come back, clap for your damn self.
Yes.
Give yourself an applause, right? I got back to Gold's Gym. I ran back into the gym. I saw Lindsey. I was like, I just ran a mile.
I do remember that, actually. Yes.
I'm so proud of myself. So one of the things you want to also be mindful of is if you're running and it feels more intense than maybe you were expecting, you want to monitor your heart rate. So oftentimes when we start to reach that point where we're really heavy, out of breath, oh my gosh, this is so hard, it's because we're pushing our body beyond what it's capable of right now. So ideally, we want to stay in a more, let's say, mid heart rate zone, ideally around a zone 3, right? Zone 2 or zone 3. Zone 2 is going to be ideal, but it's going to be a little bit harder to get to. So a moderate heart rate zone is going to be zone 3. Now, you can look more into zone 3 heart rate ranges. That'll be a different conversation for a different time. But essentially, it's 70 to 80% of your max heart rate. And you can determine your max heart rate. There's a lot of calculators out there. We'll even link one up in the show notes so you can address your max heart rate. But the key is understanding either wearing a Fitbit or an Apple Watch. Mm-hmm. If you're starting to notice, like, hey, I really do want to get into running, until you build a sense of what's known as interoception, which is the ability for you to feel how intensely your heart is pounding, feel how much you're sweating, feel kind of those bodily sensations and associate that with your heart rate, a heart rate monitor is going to be helpful. So that way you can start to notice like, oh, I feel like I can't breathe. This is really getting hard. Mm-hmm. Hey, let's check my pulse. Yeah. I might be really high in that zone 4 or 5, which is a sign that, you know, I'm pushing my body beyond what it's capable of doing long term.
Yeah. So to break that down a little bit more simply too, heart rate monitor is helpful, having like an Apple Watch. You can also track your runs on Strava or an Apple Watch or a Fitbit. That's helpful just to see the comparisons over time, especially to look at your heart rate. But max heart rate is super simple, by the way. I'll just tell you what it is so you can see an example. But it's 220 minus your age. That's your max heart rate. Mm-hmm. So if Brian's max heart rate is 220 minus 30, so he's 190 is his max heart rate. Now, zones for heart rates, again, you can do your own research on this or we can talk in depth on another episode. But zones 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, those are your 5 heart rate zones that really are helpful to figure out how hard you should push yourself or where you should be falling. A zone 1 is going to be like your warm up, like you're stretching or you're going for a walk. That's like zone 1. Zone 2 is a little bit above a walk. Maybe if you're thinking like a really light jog or you're thinking like, okay, I'm power walking, you probably will bridge into zone 2. And then zone 3 is going to feel like maybe I'm going to say like a 5 or a 6 out of, well, probably like a 6 out of 10, maybe 7. But zone 3 is going to feel like
5.
you're getting your heart rate up there. Zone 4 feels like you're really pushing yourself. Zone 5 is like absolute all out sprint. I am at full threshold, full capacity. And that's usually like a sprint that you can't maintain for more than a minute.
So when you're recognizing you're getting up to that 8 out of 10, right, you're probably in that 4.
You're too high.
And then when you start seeing, oh my gosh, I need to stop, you're probably at that 5.
Yeah. And the truth is, this will get easier over time. Your body will adapt. You will be able to do more without your heart rate jumping through the roof. But at first, like Brian said, you're going to need to go a lot slower than you think you need to when it comes to that first few runs or that first even month of running, quite honestly. If you're trying to stay between zone 2, zone 3, you're probably going to have to go pretty slow to keep your heart rate that low. Otherwise, it is going to go through the roof. So give yourself grace. Your body will adjust over time, but that's kind of a good way to start and what you're looking for. Now, next thing that we want to dig into here is everybody's biggest concern, which is injury prevention, hydration, recovery. Like how do I put this together so that I'm not getting shin splints or hurting my knees, or what if I have bad knees? Like all these questions that come up.
Yeah, so starting with shin splints, I think that's the easiest one to start with. I think
I used to get terrible shin splints.
the key here is you have to understand your running form a little bit. So shin splints often come as a result of a underutilized tibialis muscle. Right, so that's the front of our calf, right? The front of our shin. There's this muscle that runs up, and oftentimes when we're getting shin splints, is because we're running so hard on our heel, the heel of our foot, and this muscle is actually being engaged the whole time. So it's underutilized. It's not that strong of a muscle, and then we're pounding the pavement with our heel. And you think about one thing that's really useful is to listen to yourself run at first. How loud is it when you run? Because that's a good indication of how much force you're also sending up through your ankle, sending into your knee, up into your hip, right? So the first thing we want to address is our running form. Now, you don't have to overcorrect, but think of an athlete. An athlete's trying to get up on the ball of their foot, right? So all I want to try to do is just try to hit my foot in the mid part of the foot. That's a good place to start. But the key here is trying to get lighter on my feet. If you're noticing like, oh my gosh, I'm really pounding the pavement, it's like try to hit the balls of your feet. Try to get a little bit lighter, thinking like an athlete. Try to get quieter and quieter. The second thing that a lot of people struggle with is worrying about their knees. Now, one of the things you want to think of as a runner is not necessarily the knee, it's the ankle, right? So look at my hands here on the camera. If I'm running like this, so
Toes
think of
pointed in.
right. If I'm running with my toes pointed in, look at what that would do to my knee, right? That changes the whole placement of the pressure that's going to be put on this joint, right? You can think of this works the same way. If I was to walk on my hands, it's the pressure going from my ankle to my knee into my hip. So if I'm running like this with my toes pointed in, you can start to see how that changes the placement of the pressure in the knee. Now imagine if I turn my feet out, that's going to change the positioning and the force that's being placed in my knee here too. So the key here is understanding that I want to work to neutral. I want to be working in a plane that allows my knee to get less pressure and put less pressure on the inside and the outside, distributing it equally, and the same up to my hip. So again, paying attention to your running form, paying attention to the intensity you're hitting the ground, that's a helpful way to not put yourself in that injury position. The next thing I want to pay attention to is my hips, making sure that I'm warming up, making sure I'm doing mobility exercises, especially for those of you who are sitting all day. Interesting enough, when you talk about running, it's really not a quad dominant movement. It's mostly your glutes and your hamstrings that are pushing the majority of the time. So we have to warm up our glutes, ideally glute bridges, some kind of, let's say, adductor or abductor exercises, ideally clamshells or fire hydrants, and then being able to also, in time, strengthen our hamstrings, whether that's RDLs or even hamstring curls. Being able to understand that if we want to maintain proper strength while we're becoming runners, thinking, how can I strengthen my glutes? How can I strengthen my hamstrings? That's going to keep you healthier. It's going to make it easier for your hips to stay active and mobile and make it more ideal for you as you're becoming a runner.
Yeah, so a couple of things that I would tie that down with too are first, Brian talked a lot about form. Learning proper running form changed my entire relationship with running because I had knee pain, I had shin splints, like I had all those things that you probably have struggled with or seen people struggle with. And the tips that I found the most useful were the midfoot is what you're trying to aim for, not heel to toe, which is how you're taught to walk, heel to toe. It's midfoot, being lighter on your feet. And then specifically, if you think about running, imagine, or maybe do it while you listen to this. This tip helped me so much. Stand up straight and fall forward until one of your feet needs to go out in front of you to catch you. That is how it should feel while you run. You should have a slight tilt, not bent over at your back, but a slight tilt forward so that your midfoot hits the ground first. Because, at least for me, I was running straight up and down like a toy soldier and slapping my feet on the ground. And that's why I was getting so much pressure on my feet, on my ankles, on my knees, on my hips. And it caused like all these other issues like IT band syndrome and knee pain and shin splints. So lean forward, catch yourself. And that's a really good drill to start training yourself to see what does midfoot feel like. Because you can't heel strike when you fall forward. You end up hitting the midfoot. So that form is really helpful, and also keeping your shoulders away from your ears, pulling your elbows back a little bit rather than crouching forward while you're running, because you won't be able to breathe. So if we can think about falling forward, midfoot, shoulders away from your ears, elbows back, you're going to be able to really work. And I would say have a leg up on your running so that you're not succumbing to those really challenging pains and aches that come if you aren't running with proper form.
Yeah.
So that's the main one I would say.
Yeah, and I think the other pieces are just making sure you're eating enough carbohydrates when you're running. Carbohydrates are going to be your body's best energy source. Now, ideally, you're going to want to fuel properly for any run over 45 minutes. Eating how you currently are eating is probably enough, but if you know that oh my gosh, I'm going for a run at 5 p.m. and I haven't really eaten lunch or eaten any food since noon, that's a good indication to eat some carbs before you go out on the run, whether it's a banana, maybe a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, something simple, something easy.
You want to do easy to process carbs, simple carbs.
Yeah.
Piece of toast, banana.
And then hydration, water, electrolytes. If you recognize that you get a little dizzy after a run, it might be that you're low in electrolytes, so making sure you have a little bit extra sodium, that can be helpful as well.
Yeah, and what I would say if you're running in the morning is try to get at least 16 ounces of water in before you run. 32 is better. Any duration over 20 minutes, you want to at least have 16 ounces of water. Some people get a little bit wary on that because they don't want to feel like they have water sloshing around while they're running. But here's the thing. I want to address a common fear. People think that if they don't eat or if they don't have enough water, that they're going to pass out or something awful is going to happen on your run. Here's how it's actually going to feel. If you don't have the right fuel or you haven't hydrated enough, your body's going to feel drained. Like you will feel like life is draining from your body and the run feels really hard, even if you're going slow and you're following all these other tips we're giving you. If you haven't fueled properly, you're just going to feel like you get tired way faster. It's not like you're going to pass out and die.
It's going to suck a little bit more.
It's just going to suck. So don't be afraid. If you haven't eaten since a couple hours, like you don't need to carb load or do anything crazy like that. You don't need to even take the running gels. You don't need to take food with you if you're just starting to run. Even a 5K, you don't really need to fuel yourself on. It's such a short duration. So don't overthink it. Don't get scared of those things. Simplify it down. It's going to make your life a lot easier, especially with social media. It can overhype it.
Yeah, it's major and minor things. Go out and run. People have been running for the history of human existence, and I'm sure you'll be fine too.
Next, before we talk running mindset, which is going to be the tie down here in motivation, really, really important. Brian already talked about the warm-up, doing some mobility warm-up. I do an active warm-up. I don't necessarily do like glute bridges and holds type of thing, but even doing like we'll say 10 to 20 side lunges, front kicks, leg swings. You can look those up, but just doing a short warm-up to get your joints ready to take that, we'll say, pressure is really important to avoid injury. But then also, you should be stretching at the end of every run. Do not stretch before you run. You want to get your joints active and ready before you run. And then after you run, that's when you want to stretch.
Yeah, you're going to want to do, as Lindsey was saying, a dynamic stretching routine at the beginning. And even all the routines that I'm doing, even though clamshells are not as dynamic as, let's say, leg swings, it's still dynamic in nature. You want to start with dynamic, end with static.
Yes. Start dynamic, end static. And that's going to help you recover, and it's going to make sure that you don't get hurt as well and that your body feels good as you go through your runs. If you do not stretch at the end, you're going to be immensely sore and your joints will probably be achy. Whereas if you just take 3 to 5 minutes to stretch after, stretch your hips. A 90-90 stretch is great, or a figure 4 stretch is great for your hips, a quad stretch. And then you don't necessarily need to stretch your hamstrings, but stretch your calves. If you just do those 3, you are going to feel way better the next day, and you're going to recover faster.
Yep. And as you get more into running, yoga becomes your best friend. But we'll talk about that
another time. So running mindset and motivation.
This is the key, right? So
this is the fun.
We went over the basics. Here's how you get started. But how do you actually tough it out? How do you learn how to suffer? And how do you learn how to love it?
The best. You're the king of this. You ran a 50 or 65 mile race.
I ran 200 Ks. The goal of the first 62.5 mile race, this is 100K, was to learn how to endure pain and suffering. Learn how to push through every part of my psychology that was weak. And the best thing that happened was it was on Lindsey's birthday, and her mother guilted me before the race. She might not own it, but she said, it's really convenient of you to book this on Lindsey's birthday. So in my mind, I had the idea that, and I highly encourage you to listen to the old podcast that we did right after this race. It's a great deep dive into the runner's mindset.
Oh yeah, you're talking about the interview we did?
Yeah.
Brian did an interview after his ultra. We can link that below. And then I did an interview after my ultra, which we can link below too.
The key here, though, was halfway through the race, I was like, this is going to go really easy. I'm going to get done in this time. Lindsey and I are going to go celebrate her birthday. And I hit a wall. And that wall made it glaringly obvious that I was not going to get done anywhere close to the amount of time that I set. And what ended up happening was I had to deal with all the guilt and the shame and the judgment. And the whole time I'm like, I don't need to even finish this race. It's stupid. No one even cares. So you're out there in the middle of the wilderness for all this time dealing with your thoughts. And someone commented recently on one of Lindsey's posts about running, like, how do you deal with negative self-talk? It's like you go to war with it. You have to see this as a process of you taking apart your psychology and then rebuilding it and learning how to get tough. And what's great is you're going to learn how to get tough. And with that toughness, you're going to be able to apply it to other areas of life. So if you really want to level up, if you really want to challenge yourself, the mindset is understanding that on the other side of this pain, so long as it's not injury, is something good. Most of the pain you're going to experience in running, it's all mental.
Yeah.
I prepped for my ultra marathon in the middle of the Dallas heat. It was 112 degrees. I'd be running 20 miles. And I did it because no one else could. So you don't have to necessarily adopt the Brian psychology. It might be a little farther away for you, but the truth is I only got there by starting to run a mile. Right? So it was building and building and building and building. And it took me 4 years. And like Lindsey said, it was COVID. I had nothing else to do, so I started running. You can find your own way, but the key is understanding that who you're going to become on the other side. That's who you're chasing. It doesn't matter. The trophies are BS. You're going to throw them away someday. You are going to be able to look back when you're 60 or 70, and you're going to tell your grandkids, like, look at what I accomplished. And you're going to tell them great stories. And more importantly, you're going to be able to hold on to those stories. It's the essence of the human spirit. That's what you're pursuing.
Great answer.
What are your answers? Mine's a little intense, but
no. So the question was, how do you? It's kind of how do you stay motivated, but it's also like how do you get through it, right? How do you get through it when you're in the middle of a run and you've already committed to doing 30 minutes or 60 minutes or 6 miles or whatever it is? How do you get through when your mind starts to be like, I'm so tired. This is so hard. I can't do it. Your little whiny 5-year-old comes out, right? How do you handle that? What do you do with that? And my answer is honestly, at first, you just start slapping the wrist of your own mind. You say, no, nope, nope, not today. And that was my first step, was just starting to be like, nope, not helpful. I didn't even start saying, wow, I'm amazing, I can do anything. I didn't jump to positive self-talk. And we had a client on our team who was really diligently working on her mindset because she was running the London Marathon. And she really struggled. Her mind won often, saying, I'm too tired, my feet hurt, okay, I'm going to walk. Walking's not the end of the world, but it's the fact that your mind won. Your mind, the weakness in you won. So the first thing and first step is just like acknowledging that, hey, just because I think it doesn't mean it's true. Mm-hmm. And if that's not already a base level belief, then here's news for you. Your thoughts aren't reality until you let them become so. Your thoughts are just thoughts. So if you can understand that you might think, oh, I'm tired, but your body might not actually be at the point where it's tired and needs to stop, right? Your mind might just have that thought and it'll go away in 5 minutes. You'll notice that if you start to separate yourself from your thoughts. So the first thing is I just start saying, no, absolutely not. That's not helpful. I'm not going to think that way. And then I start to redirect my focus. And maybe I start to say simple things like, oh, this is just a little jog. I like diminish the pain. I diminish the issues that are coming up in my mind. And that's an anchor I found a long time ago.
Yeah, one of the things that, to build off of what Lindsay's saying, I find to be really useful is if the running becomes hard, become neutral. Just focus on your breath, right? So all these things like, yeah, you have to direct your mind. You have to slap yourself on the wrist. One thing that's really helpful is just become present too.
Yeah, just focus on your breathing.
Focus on your breathing.
Yep.
It's just a mindfulness and a meditative process.
Which is still redirecting your focus.
Yes, you're still redirecting your focus, and the thing that you're focusing on is your breath.
Yep.
Just focus on your breath. Focus on your breath. And those long runs, some days be 44 miles. Oh, that's a long time to be with yourself. It's crazy. Just, hey, I'm out here. Yep. I'm just doing this. I'm just here. I'm just in this present moment. I don't need a podcast. And actually, most of the runs, they were podcast-less. Because halfway through, it would get so hard that I couldn't listen to the podcast and what I was trying to do. Mm-hmm. So I would just have to become present. So you can use that same thing. It's just become present. When your thoughts wander, come back. You can redirect them to something more positive, but maybe at first it's just, I just need to focus on the next post. Set
That's what
small
I was going to
goals,
say.
Right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of different tactics and things that you can test and play with, but understand that at the root, it is redirecting your focus and becoming more present. Mm-hmm. Because when you start to think of how many miles you have left or how far you have to go or how hard it is, any of those thoughts are going to defeat you if you let them persist and get stronger and get louder. So all these different tactics are just get present, refocus, get present, refocus. So you can set those little milestones like, hey, I'm just going to go to the next poll. I'm going to go to the next mailbox, right? You can tell yourself, like, diminish the intensity. Hey, it's just a little jog I'm on. Like, I don't need to walk. I'm just doing a little jog. Like, you can change your dialogue. And that's really what it comes back to is get present, redirect. Get present, redirect. And that's it.
And once you learn how to do that, you'll realize that you'll probably end up running further too.
Yeah, you'll run further and you won't be as disturbed.
That telephone pole, I could do another telephone pole.
Yeah.
So it's really understanding that you got to give yourself small goals. You have to see the overall run as a process of becoming. And what you'll find through this process is it's the most beautiful thing to experience life through your own eyes, on the road, in a new city.
That's true.
In a place you've never been that's beautiful and gorgeous. Just being able to experience nature, right? There's so many things that you'll get. One of my favorite things from clients is when they're traveling and they send a picture. Like one of my clients went to Rome and he's like, "Oh my God, I ran around the Colosseum." It's like, man, that's a life. That's a beautiful gift. He was someone who, he's 40 pounds overweight when he first started and could never imagine running that far. So I think that just reminding yourself that you're going to experience more of life through this process. There's so many wonderful things that I've experienced running. It's been a remarkable gift. I truly never expected myself to love running. I never expected myself to enjoy this. And the only reason why I did is because I set small goals. I found the beauty through the process, and I started to get present. So that's what I would give you as a parting piece as you're starting this, is just continue to be present. Look for the good things. It's going to suck a little bit, but it's going to be worth it.
Yeah. And I would also agree, but I would say my parting thoughts would be baby steps. Set small goals, conquer small goals. Really do your best to not compare yourself, but aspire. You can aspire to run a 10K. You can aspire to run a 5K or a half marathon, but don't compare yourself to the point where you are discouraged. It's not helpful. Just focus on your small wins. Remember that your body is going to get stronger. Your stamina will go up, and just be really present. Enjoy the process, especially as you watch yourself get better. It's very satisfying, and it happens within the first month. It doesn't take years. It takes like a month. So get through that first month of running a couple times a week, and you'll be pretty proud of yourself. But with that said,
we hope this is helpful. We hope there's a big takeaway. So if you're on YouTube, comment your big takeaway, your thoughts, and give this video a thumbs up. If you're on Apple Podcasts, screenshot this podcast, shout us out on IG, and let us know your takeaway. And again, hit the road. Have some fun this summer. And until next time, go out and conquer your day.
cheers.
Cheers.